Our final student presentation of the day will be given by Laure Muller. She, Laure, came to us with a Master's of Science in Engineering from Switzerland, where she worked as an engineer. And as if it wasn't enough to quit her job, move to the United States with her family, she also grew her family while she was here in the program. Some of you may hear baby Landon. I see him up there on the top. Yes. And she made it look pretty easy, all while getting a marine conservation master's degree. Switzerland is not a coastal country, and doing it in a foreign language. Through her previous career in engineering, Laure spent time looking at waste in other industries and communities. For her capstone, she was excited about looking at this new seafood system that connects us to the ocean. It's not about digging anymore, like her old job. It's about fish, and about mastering the art of using fish. So the title of her presentation today is Big Fish in a Small Plate, a Bigeye's journey toward a head-to-tail utilization in San Diego.
Let me start with a simple question that has a not so easy answer. How do we feed a growing population while sustaining wild fisheries? The point here is that wild capture fisheries are at the maximum capacity while seafood consumption continues to rise. One way to meet the increased demand is aquaculture, and we learned a lot about that today thanks to Kat. The other, the one I choose to focus on today, is to look harder at the fish that we are catching and ask whether we are maximizing the protein use and value of the fish that we bring out of the sea. So we don't want to take more fish, but can we use it better? So in an effort to answer that question, I would like to take you with me downtown San Diego. The city has a long history of tuna fishing, dating back to the end of the 19th century, and was once known as the tuna capital of the world. Many may still be surprised that we have a small but thriving tuna fishery here today. And because the fishery is small, we can look at from an end to end. So if you happen to show up at the fish market on a Saturday morning, you will be amazed by the diversity of our local catch. Fresh fish are landed by different types of fisheries. And when I say landed, I mean the fishing vessel offload their catch in San Diego's Bay or directly to the market. However, there are many other species we catch when we fish for tuna, species that we retain and sell and eat. Here you have a few examples. We have wahoo, the opa, the monchong, or the mahi-mahi. They are all delicious. But let's come back to our main character, tuna, or should I say Bigeye tuna. This large pelagic fish, up to 2 meters, is the target species for the fresh tuna market we have here. And he's the subject of my study. 30% of all landings. This is what I meant when I said that at the beginning that we have a thriving tuna fishery today. And Bigeye is not only a good research subject because the fishery is small. The fishery is relevant for San Diego, and while other species are catched along the way, this one drives the fishery. It represents a large percent of the catch for commercial fisheries, and therefore it's a good one to focus on this quest for a full utilization. Now, when you look at this illustration, you might think that the entire fish drives the fishery. But what drives the fishery is actually the fillet. He's the driver of the market, and he's the driver of the fishery for its high quality, bright red, fresh flesh that's good for sushi, poke, or steaks. But the fillet, the part that we consider edible, represents just about 50% of the fish. So what about the rest of the tuna? In this part of the Pacific, Bigeye weighs about 80 pounds. So that means that we have another 40 pounds of opportunities. The 40 pounds that we don't eat, are they utilized? Are they underused? Can we derive food, protein, or value from these? This question, what happens to the rest of the fish, was the trigger for my study. But because we can't manage what we can't measure, I decided to start with characterizing the supply chain and defining what, where, and how much by raw material is produced along the tuna value chain, from harvest at sea to the processing plant to the seafood counter. Now, other people might call it waste, but I like to call it by raw material. This helps us shift our perspective and see waste as potential material for opportunities when we are heading towards a full utilization. Now, with the goal of characterizing by weight the Bigeye supply chain, I use different data sources. I would not say that data collection and formatting was the easiest part of my study. It was challenging, and for many reasons. First, because it involved different stakeholders. You don't sit with the same people when you're looking at the fishery at sea that when you look at the fish on land. And every stakeholder has its own compliance requirements regarding data production and sharing. Therefore, as me, data don't always speak the same language. So let me give you just an example. When you look at Bigeye landings, okay, you get data from those agencies. And what you get is actually the total amount of Bigeye that land in San Diego. But this amount is considered as round. So what I mean by that is that they consider that the fish land here is the entire fish. But when you start looking at landing tickets and speak with fishermen, you realize that actually the fish are gutted at sea. So what I mean by that is that their guts and gills are removed at sea. So when they land here, they don't have that part. And when you try to quantify biomass, that makes a significant difference. Also, because catch data or measurement were not always available, I had to use proxy and expertise on top of data set. And this is particularly true for what's happening at sea. Now, I use the metabolism approach to describe the supply chain. I am balancing everything that comes in with everything that comes out of the system. That's what I mean by balance equation. It's based on this mass conservation principle. It's pretty easy. Everything that comes in has to come out, and fish actually comes out two ways: sales, so they are sold as food, or they are waste, what I call by raw material. So each box here represents steps in the supply chain. The blue box represents steps at sea, and the gray boxes, steps on land. Fish are harvested at sea, their gills and guts are removed, and they land in San Diego and are transported to the processing facility. So once they're there, their head are removed and they are graded. Grading is an important step because that's when the quality of the fish is assessed based on the color of its flesh. So then they're either sold whole or as a fillet. And some are sold frozen or even canned, but most of the fish here is sold fresh. And by raw material happens already at sea with bait lost, catch not retained, and guts and gills removal. And once landed, the material, by raw material happens at the processing facility and translates into head, tails, bones, and skin, as well as dark meat. Now, this is the result for the mass balance analysis for 2018. Numbers here are in pounds. The model was successful in accounting all the biomass along the supply chain. It was successful in identifying by raw material what was sold as food as well as what was stored. There is little unnecessary waste along the supply chain. And one, I think, interesting finding is that by raw material actually are pretty diffuse throughout the supply chain and also at the consumer level, because there is a significant amount of fish that actually sold just with the head and the tail removed. And that's important when you look for opportunities, because you want to target by raw material that you can actually get your hands on. And finally, one important point is that this model, this approach is actually replicable to other fisheries or locations. Now that we look at the supply chain, just let's zoom in on the fish. Remember, we consume 50% of the fish, that's the other 50%. That's the potential for us to get to the full utilization. And based on the result we just discussed, there are 4 categories of waste or by raw material. The guts and gills, 9%, they are returned to the ocean and get eaten. The head and tail, 11% of the fish. The head is used as lobster bait half of the year, and the rest goes to compost or follow the traditional waste management system here in San Diego. Finally, we have the carcass, the skin, and the lower grade meat that are left in the processing facility. So the question now is, how do we turn these into useful product? For example, you might think that fish skin cannot be that useful for us, that there aren't ways to utilize it. But actually, there is a lot of uses for the skin alone. Tuna skin can be turned into fish leather for garment. But not only can the skin be used into fashion, tuna skin can be used for medical purposes. Other fish skin have proved more effective at treating burns than traditional synthetic bandages. Last year, for example, vets at UC Davis treated a bear and a mountain lion burns with tilapia skin. And fish skin technology is also available to heal human wounds. In fact, Icelandic fish skin is already used for tissue regeneration in the US. So tuna skin could maybe be an important medical commodity with the rise of California wildfire. But the real emphasis of the study is to maximize the protein content per fish caught for human consumption. We need to explore new processing and preservation methods for tuna cuts that are underused or undervalued, such as the lower grade tuna that could be turned into a local mohama, this delicious salt-dried Spanish tuna that gains popularity within the US. Carcass could be retained and maybe processed to produce savory fish extract or turned into surimi powder. All ideas here will support the full utilization and provide more protein, which hopefully enable better use of our natural resources and potentially bring more value to our fishermen. So let's get back to my initial question. How do we feed the world and keep fish in our oceans? Policy and industry have been really focused addressing the protein issue with improving fishing gear, catching methods, and increasing the transparency and traceability of the supply chain. But to complete the picture and truly increase the efficiency of our fisheries, I believe the full utilization of the fish needs to be brought into this equation. And thank you very much for your attention. So I'd like to thank everyone here, and especially Sarah Mesnick, who has been like a great support and a great mentor along this project, and the whole year actually, and of course Samantha, and every one of you, and of course my family that are up there. Thank you so much. That's one question. Yes, Gracie.
So this is so interesting and so cool. And I was wondering if you've thought at all about creating communication tools to spread this knowledge to different audiences.
Not yet, but that might be the next step. There's so many things we can go from here, but that's an interesting way to go. Thank you for this suggestion.
Nice work.
Thank you.